Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're going to be talking about the Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos prequel movie. And we'll be talking with Dr. Ben Lamb, who's a lecturer in media at Teesside University, author of Your Nit, investigating British television police series. But the series we're going to talk about today is an American crime one. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Or as they say in The Sopranos, whoa!
So you wanted to come on the podcast to talk with us because you're a mega fan of The Sopranos, right?
That is correct.
I'm not familiar with the show really at all. I mean, I know of it, but I've seen the first episode and the final scene, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
Jose, you're familiar with the show, right?
Yeah, I know the show. So actually, I think a good way of beginning is to ask you, Ben, since you know more about it than any of the rest of us, how well does this situate and connect to the series?
I think there's four things I really liked about this film.
Okay.
I thought the main thing for me was some of the casting, not all of the casting. There was some problematic casting, but I think the way they cast Tony Soprano's mother, Paulie Walnuts was really good. Tony's father. I think that some of the key characters who really brought a lot of life and character to the series, most of them weren't really overplayed. I think they spent a lot of time on the casting, and they had the key mannerisms, but also brought a lot of weight and made the role their own. I think Tony's mother in particular was really good. And what I found interesting, I don't know about your screening, my screening was absolutely packed. It's the most full I've seen a cinema. We couldn't get a 6:30 screening. We had to go at like 4:20 on a Friday. I hope my employees aren't listening. And even then it was full, and we had people sat next to us who were mega fans, and they were really excited, and they were laughing at key mannerisms and the sort of way the roles had been interpreted, being fans of the show themselves. So I thought that worked really well.
We didn't have any of that, Ben. We had a pretty empty screening.
We were seeing it at 2:20 on a Sunday. Did you see it on like the day of release or something like that?
Yeah, it was the day of release. Yeah, so that's
right.
that
So
might have
people
been
were
something
kind of
to it.
a bit more into it. The other thing was our screening was subtitled, which I did know about, but I completely forgot, and I didn't tell you. And actually, I didn't mind it.
I didn't mind it. The other interesting thing is that halfway through our screening, you began to get this immersive smoke of pot. Right?
Oh, wow.
There's a particular kind of Soprano fan here. Right?
Yeah, someone lit up. I found that really fucking annoying.
So, Ben, what were the other 2 points? I don't want to lose sight of it. I just wanted to interject.
Sure. What I really liked about this was how often a lot of films or spin-offs or prequels, when they add something to a television series, they can ruin the mystery or the aura, especially with prequels. I thought this didn't manage to do that. So you think about Star Wars and this Darth Vader being evil and this ungodly things happen to him. When you see that happening to Hayden Christensen, who's a terrible actor, it ruins and undoes a lot of the mystery. Whereas I thought, partly maybe it's as a result of Michael Gandolfini being a limited actor, but I think they did a lot to not overplay him and still have a bit of an aura and a bit of mystery to the character. Also, I didn't think the 60s was too heaped in nostalgia. Often a period piece can be full of rose-tinted glasses, sunny uplands, music constantly blaring, and the film's trying to tell you weren't things better back then, whereas it was a bit more. There was some nostalgia to it, but it was very reserved and trying to show you that actually things were quite bleak back then, and it was every man for himself and families constantly fighting. So
I think it's a smart thing to set it around the Newark race riots.
Yeah.
That kills the sense of wasn't stuff great back then, because stuff is not great at all, and there's a backdrop of quite an explicit backdrop of racial tension and racial violence to the whole thing.
And am I right in thinking, Ben, that that's new? I don't remember much. I don't remember many black people from the series at all, actually. But I certainly don't remember any racial tensions. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, there are 1 or 2 episodes, and it's quite alarming when it happens. There's an episode where Tony Soprano's daughter starts dating a black man at university, and Tony completely overreacts and tells him to get out the family. And there's another episode where there's a bit of a rivalry. I think Chris wants to become a rapper, Chris Soprano. So there's this sort of tension about not getting too involved. So I think it did actually help enhance those certain episodes because there's a bit of racial tension and it could seem a bit outdated. But now you know the sort of environment the characters were in within the race riots and how tense things were. It does actually help do that bit of world building, which I quite liked.
I think it's in the film, it's structural, it's essential. It kind of redefines it anyway, because it sets up an Italian underworld of really an oppressed social formation, and then kind of clearly shows the shift here of how they themselves are the oppressors in a very triumphant way, also, right? So it immediately creates a dimension for the world, I think, that was lacking before. I don't know what you thought, but my view was that it was a very good screenplay, but it's not a very good film. And that connects in a way to, this is a prequel, but it's a film. Yeah, kind of. The other thing is a television series. I think that I didn't see the visual potential in kind of making it a big screen, cinema experience evident in the film. I mean, what did you think, Mike and Ben?
I quickly looked at kind of Rotten Tomatoes after I came out of the film to get the gist of what people thought, and it seems to have got very mixed reviews. And I said that to Jose, and we reflected that we weren't that surprised about that. For someone who knows nothing really about these characters, about the history and everything, I knew there was stuff I was missing, histories of characters and things. And I'm sure there are all sorts of links. But for me, that was really lost on me. The film felt like it really lacked narrative drive. I mean, an hour and a half, as it turned out, into the film, I checked my phone to see how long it had been, because I despite the fact I enjoyed like every scene, I didn't know what they were adding up to and where we were going with it. There's a real collage feel to the whole thing.
I must say, I didn't feel that. Yeah? Yeah, and I wonder how you felt, Ben, because, I mean, this is maybe we're knowing a little bit about the Sopranos, features, because I did feel that towards the end, I almost looked at my watch, but I didn't, right? Yeah. So, I mean, what is your view, Ben?
Yeah, I was happy to get lost in that world for an hour and a half as a super fan. I think I really appreciated how I think there must have been a huge temptation for a series that's really quick fire dialogue and humorous. I think there must, and the creators are quite big fans of Scorsese as well. I think it could have easily become a mess. Whereas I appreciated how they were trying to do something slow paced and build, and it seemed to avoid cliche. I thought, which was admirable, and it wasn't too focused on look how this kid turns psychopathic or anything like that. It held me for an hour and a half, but I do think it is problematic for people unfamiliar with the series. I took my dad to see it, and he completely missed the end. He was like, "Oh, I can't wait any longer to go to the toilet," and he came in, and the credits were rolling. Like, it didn't feel like it was building to anything, and he missed the whole point to it.
I was thinking about it in relation to El Camino, which was the Breaking Bad movie they made after the series finished. Because Breaking Bad is another quote-unquote great American TV series. It's one of these canonical, like Mad Men, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire, are like the big four. And it's one of the ones that I'm familiar with, I've seen. And when the film came out, that's not a prequel, it's set after the end of the series. I was thinking, why do we need to see any of this? Like, the series ended so well. What's this really adding? I don't need to know what happens to these characters afterwards. It just feels like a bit of a waste of my time. I can see this having more purpose. It's like, because it's the origin story, right? Like, the big guy, this is where he comes from, although the focus is more on this uncle character. But that's the point, right? It's the world and the family he comes from and the things that kind of built him. Although I do think that if Michael Gandolfini were a better actor, as you suggested, I think they might have actually given him more to do, and it might feel like that link to the character you then see in the series might be stronger. I don't know what you feel about that. How strongly do you feel it links with the series? Do you think it's not so much? How do you think it functions, not as an introduction to the series, but as kind of scene setting?
I think it's quite quite limited. Actually, I think there's only something here for the fans and the super fans as well, because there's a bit where Junior Corrado towards the end, spoiler alert, slips and breaks his back, and then you see him getting that distinctive walk. And I think they mentioned in the series how it might have been through a fight or something. So it's almost like a collection of Easter eggs almost. I found it was like, here's a little hint about something that's going to happen later. Here's how why there's animosity between these certain characters. I without sounding too harsh, I felt like it was a television film. Really, it's for the geeks, it's for the super fans to notice the real to find pleasure and joy in the real nuanced and geeky stuff that is referenced at some point in series 4 and all this stuff. It doesn't. I don't know if it really stands up as a film itself.
I
really.
think the writing is superb, though. I mean, I thought it was like crackling, and I was with it at all times, and I thought, the characterizations were terrific. I thought the actors were terrific. I mean, I don't agree about Michael Gandolfini. I thought he was fantastic, really. I did think that Alessandro Nivola, who played the lead, really, Multisanti, I thought it was something kind of interesting about cinema in a way, because I thought he was very good, but he lacked charisma. Yeah, there was something about the way that the light fell on his face that didn't hold you. And if you don't cast a star in that part, where actually so many of the other supporting characters are, they're kind of, they're stars on television, they're very charismatic, you want to see what they do next, and the young woman who played the wife of the old guy, I mean, she really was like Sophia Loren. You watch her and you immediately go, who's this person, right? Like you want to watch. She's beautiful and sexy, and kind of, you can see everything in her face. So when you have those kinds of actors, that are very charismatic, and the light hits on them properly, and they're also good performers, and then the sensual one is it's a problem for the project.
I know how you feel about Alessandro Nivola. We've seen him before. We saw him in Disobedience, which was that North London Jewish lesbian film.
Yes.
And he was very good in that. He was in rabbi sort of garb, but he was extremely good. And there is something about seeing him here, clean shaven, doing the mob thing, that he's never not engaging or fun to watch, but he does lack that X factor that makes him a captivating presence. He does lack that somehow.
And I wanted to ask you, Ben, because you're the TV expert, like about the relations between cinema and TV. I was looking at the director. He's a director who's mainly worked on television, in a lot of very famous series, Game of Thrones, and he did Sopranos and so on. But there is really something, and I thought this before even knowing who directed it or what he'd done before, but there was something just that in the cinema you expected more. Yes, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what is it? Is it that there's no long shots? Is that there's what is it about it? But it felt very televisual to me. Yeah, it felt that you were missing out on something that a big screen presentation could provide that wasn't being made here. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but really, what did you think?
I thought the same. I think The Sopranos was a series that really understood cinema, and you think about gangster films. It's a really saturated market, and they created a TV show that understands that world. And there's a really good essay that talks about how Tony Soprano is inherently depressed and has problems because he can't be the Godfather, or he can't be. He talks about Gary Cooper a lot. He can't be a cinematic gangster. And there's often scenes of it that they often talk about gangster films, and they'll show a shot of them watching gangster films, and there's almost an acknowledgement there that they're in the real world and can't inhabit this visual way of expressing themselves, and that's why that's where a lot of the humour comes from, why he has to explain to his daughter why he's suddenly got blood on his knuckles during a college visit. And I felt the same. I felt these are essentially television writers, directors who know that the cinematic screen gives you something a bit extra, and I felt it in one way it was trying to be visual, and I understood that. I felt that the actually dialogue often could be quite minimal and subtle. It wasn't all quick fire jokes and witty dialogue and somewhat bang bang bang. It was more, it had that bit of that slower pace that you expect from cinema. But yeah, I think you're right. You didn't see any compositions on screen where it was telling you anything in addition to the dialogue. I felt there wasn't that.
Also the poetic elements, the visual poetic elements. So there are two scenes specifically which are referencing, classic films. I mean, Mike mentioned this, right? The first scene is all about the Godfather, right? One of the women is called Apollonia and so on. And when you think of the wedding scene, at the beginning of the Godfather, and you compare this, to the baptism or first communion scene in this, like, it's not the visuals, or even the intercutting, or, so many things that you could do to kind of create tension and beauty and poetry and, connections to the rest of the film. This film is doing none of that, really, Yeah. And the other was the Scorsese bit from Goodfellas, where, kind of the shootout starts, and they try to make it comic, right? Through the blood going on the mustard suit and then the wig, And actually, you think here it's a question of rhythm and editing, and and it's not doing that either, really. So, and I think the references to those specific films, to me, brought out this film's lacks.
Mind you, the shootout with the black gang in the street where they go behind the cars, that really worked for me. I thought that was great, actually. And there's movement in that, and the one character runs off, and is he going to get shot, and the running out of bullets and all that. And it had those little moments, and it really came together. And so I do kind of agree. The thing is, there's a thing about the way that like American prestige TV looks, which is different from how sort of cable drama looks, And this has that look. So it's not quite cinematic, but it's a level above regular televisual, if you get what I mean. It's trying to do more with the image. It's being a little braver with compositions and things like that, but it does lack something.
I don't even mean on the level of budget, or a particular look, right? I meant actually, but because to me, great cinema, there's something poetic about it, you are using visuals and light, and angles, to convey something that communicates something and maybe also stands for something else, right? Whereas actually this whole film, I feel, is driven by dialogue. The camera's always following the dialogue or the action, right?
And which is a hallmark of television. Dialogue rules.
So, I think this is...
But I wouldn't be so brave as to say, there's none of that, because the thing is, The Sopranos and the shows like it, they have books written about them, about the things that people see in them, the symbolism.
Oh, no,
stuff.
I'm not making a case here, for cinema is better, or kind of, but this is better. But I think that, they are different. They communicate differently. I mean, you have 90 minutes or 2 hours to tell a whole story and create a whole world, as opposed to having 10 seasons of The Sopranos to develop all of those things.
All I mean is, though, that it's just that we're right in our initial response to say, I felt a lack of poetry here visually. But I bet you any money someone's going to be adding this to the next edition of their Sopranos book, and they say, look at the links, look at the things it draws. Of course.
You
know what I mean? So,
of course, I'm not saying it's without it. I mean, here I'm talking about, is it a great movie? My answer is no. And this is the reason why, right? Like,
sure.
So I'm not saying it's without interest, or that the fans won't find it interesting, or that there's not connections to be made. I think that it does all those things, and in fact, I think it is better than I think you think, because I do think the screenplay is fantastic. So I mean, I think it is a good story to tell, and I think it does add something to this world. And I laughed
it's very funny.
I laughed constantly about unexpected things.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So anyway, we've been talking too much, Ben. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I did laugh quite a bit. I love the scene where Ray Liotta, towards the start, Ray Liotta's getting killed by having his head repeatedly slammed into the car horn, and that is classic Sopranos, really. Violence that is quite difficult to watch. It's quite prolonged, drawn out, but also has this undercurrent of humour about it as well. And
Jose yelped.
I did, and I there were many times where actually I covered my eyes, because yeah, in spite of what people think, I am sensitive to those things. I also thought that particular thing didn't work for me. And I'll tell you why. Because, I can't imagine an Italian son doing that to his father. Or at least certainly not without narrative explanation. Yeah, the links, the religion, the culture, the mother, I think all would dampen the normal edible desire to do so. Yeah, there are reasons why you don't kill your father, even when you might be tempted to. And I think we needed more of a context or a background for that before I at least accept it as happening. I mean, obviously it happens, yeah, but I think it's kind of a narrative cheap shot, actually.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the reason they did that it was to connect to the series. Probably when you look at the series, it's incredibly Freudian, and it's about how Tony grew to hate his father and is intimidated by his mother. And I also think it was trying to replicate the gender politics as well. So there's a lot of good feminist essays that talk about the reason The Sopranos works is because you have a lot of it doesn't endorse the misogyny around it. What you have are a lot of really intelligent women who will reveal pieces of information to other women at a certain point to ensure that the men do what they want. And you had a bit of that there. I think it was really calculated the way his stepmother kissed him at a certain point to sort of plant this idea in his mind to sort of sow the seeds of discontent with his dad and his childhood. So I think it was thematically doing something in relation to the series. But you're right, it did happen a bit quickly and could have been fleshed out more in terms of plot and context.
I think also the film structurally missed the point, because I think what you're saying is so interesting and so true of the series, But here, that kind of woman's world and maneuvering through a woman's world, and a woman's world also having peepholes of power, and action, and you don't get almost any interrelationship between the women actually,
That's true.
Themselves. It's always like the women in relation to the men, right? And actually there is a whole world that I think the film misses out on, and had it succeeded in doing that, if it had shown that what we see of black, kind of culture of the period and the gangsterism and its relation to the Italian gangsters, I mean, that would have been very, very powerful stuff. I think they missed an opportunity there, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think there were maybe, obviously, the 60s, 70s was probably more of a man's world, and I like how they had that element. But you're right, it would fail the Bechdel test. It missed out on an opportunity to be as, in terms of gender, be as interesting. Definitely. I was going to ask, what did you think about the sound design? I don't know if I was. No, I think that the sound mixing wasn't really that good. I think it was intriguing what they did, and it was interesting. I felt that often I was having to lean in because the voices were quite quiet, and there was a group of lads next to us who were huge fans of The Sopranos, and they weren't being particularly loud. They were just sort of whispering and saying, "Oh, do you remember that bit?" And they weren't being antisocial, but it was almost drowning it out, and I was sort of having to pay real attention. And there was a scene where the main I can't remember the main character's name, but he was having a falling out with his wife, and they were shouting. It had like a tinny quality, and I thought, oh, maybe there's something wrong with the projection. And then suddenly at the end, the music was so loud and it was really impactful. I thought, oh, that must have been a conscious decision. And I don't know if that undid the whole point of the film, because it was like, oh, this is effectively. It's like the opening scene in Goodfellas almost. It was the whole point is the prelude up to this boom. And then getting you back into the series. So I don't know if that worked for me. It was interesting, but
in our screening, I would say our screening was really beautiful. I think it might be because of the subtitles. It was a digital projection because it had that is what brought the subtitles to it, and because it was then digital, it looked absolutely beautiful. And I didn't notice anything with that respect with the sound. Although I did kind of think, I'm glad this does have subtitles, because I would miss some of these jokes. I would miss some of this dialogue. There's a lot of Italian spoken and kind of Sicilian slang that is just spelled out on screen when you've got the subtitles, and that's very helpful, because these would be things that I would be, oh, did I hear that right? What am I supposed to be hearing? You know what I mean? So that kind of actually made it easier. Well, obviously subtitles make it easier to understand, but it was very useful, I suppose. I did think it was very heavy on Foley, the sound mix. I mean, there's a lot of footsteps on gravel paths and guns cocking and stuff, and they're very present in your ears. I think maybe that has something to do with.
And actually, the subtitle print makes that even more obvious because it's constantly telling you, footprints on grass.
There were proper closed caption subtitles with all of that. Yeah,
I must say that I love the music and the choices of the music, and the way that they periodize it. I thought actually they were really inventive, right? To have like Neil Diamond and Van Morrison, along with all the black groups, and to kind of make Miles Davis a feature. Yeah, it's very different than the choices that you would get, say, from a Scorsese, where it would be like Bobby Darin and Frank Sinatra. It's a kind of almost like a different vocabulary. I think this is much truer to period. Yeah, you have Sinatra, but you have maybe one of his worst songs. But that was the hit of '67. So it's doing a function of periodizing rather than getting you to buy the album. Yeah, it's I thought I really loved the soundtrack.
Yeah, that was great. That's something that's often praised about the series as well. The interesting songs they often chose at the end of each episode, and when they famously chose a song by John Cooper Clarke, the Manchester poet, and that brought his career back to life. The fact it was used at such a key moment and worked so well. And I really liked the music during the race riots. Actually, it really added a sense of tension.
And the Gil Scott Heron poem.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah,
that's spoken over it. Yeah, that was actually. I thought, oh, here's something that's not televisual. I mean, you might get it on a experimental sort of episode of the show, but it doesn't seem like something you would normally get. It felt like taking a break from the story for a minute to just set this scene. Actually, I wanted to ask. I suppose it relates to what I wanted to ask, which was, do we think that it was actually doing anything that interesting with the setting in racial tension and the race riots, and with the black gang versus the Italian gang? My estimation, despite that scene, which I really liked, is that mostly it wasn't, and most of the setup was a bit simple, a bit obvious, maybe.
I think one of the things that I love that. Yeah, it's a way of reclaiming that history, really, and of representing it, and also of contextualizing. So for me, it had the effect of bringing Black Power into it, right? And that moment, where you're saying black is beautiful and we can do this, and and Vietnam, we're good for cannon fodder but not good for civil rights. All of that can be read into it, right? But then if you're reading it into the series, what comes after, then you see that this was a moment. This was all dampened down. This was all incorporated, right? Yeah, this illusion of progress, of taking what's yours and so on, kind of dissolves, later on by the 80s and so on.
It's taking this black gang, and the leader of the gang in particular, Harold, is all about, I'm going to do this for myself. No more working for the Italian-American gangsters.
It treats me like a Pullman porter. It's a very resonant phrase.
Setting up my own gang, to the point where when they interrogate the... I can't remember the guy's name, but the one where they take his teeth out and end up shooting him. The whole point of that is that he reveals that Harold was working for himself. He wasn't told to kill whoever it was by someone else. He was doing it for himself, and that's a big deal to Dick, the main character. He's quite stunned by that. And then you also have the Italian woman, the wife, who comes over, and she wants to set up her own business. She wants to do things for herself and so on. And so you have these two. You have basically a kind of a racial underclass and a sexual underclass, I suppose, fighting for their own right to do things that the men are always in charge of. And I suppose the way that the men react, mostly in the person of Dick, is just by lashing out and killing people left, right, and centre. I suppose it makes sense. He has no. That's the only way he reacts to things. He kills people quite a lot, and with much thought or remorse. I suppose when he kills his dad, it's accidental, but he is beating the fuck out of him. And when he kills the mistress, the dad's
I hated that moment, by the way. I thought that was another moment that made me think, if you're making a movie, you need to do better with this death scene. Because those waves, the dress, the strangling, the water, it had the potential to communicate so much. And there was clearly no thought about what visuals could communicate to this particular scene. It was just, I could have shot that better than this filmmaker. I think an amateur would have, really. It's a really key moment in the film, and it's just thrown away, really.
But he kills these two people that are important to him, and well, I suppose he has remorse because then he wants to do these good deeds, and that's when he has met his dad's brother, who's also played by Ray Liotta. And I thought it's great Ray Liotta's playing a different type of character. I mean, I thought he was really good as the brother. Yes. And the brother's wonderful. this kind of guru Buddha figure who's been in prison for 20 odd years for doing murder, and he's a really bizarre presence. I really liked him. And he immediately works out that Dick has murdered these people. It's so obvious.
Those scenes were really funny as well. I thought that you don't usually see Ray Liotta in that sort of role. You usually see him in the other brother, where he's turning everything up to 11 and losing it, and then that dialogue was fantastic.
But even in that earlier role, he was funny.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
In a completely different way, I thought. I love that.
Well, the thing about... Sorry, I just finished. So the thing about when he gets to the brother, and the brother becomes this kind of guru, and he wants to do these good deeds, and he opens up to the brother about this. There's a lot of... the thing about the TV series that I kind of centrally know, because it's all about the first episode, the first episode is all about it, is that Tony Soprano's seeing a psychiatrist. Right, and that's a kind of like this central, I suppose, emasculating thing for him. If anyone found out, he'd be mocked or whatever else, maybe something probably a lot worse. And there is a lot of people opening up to each other in this, or at least trying to. It happens quite a few times with the young Tony. He's trying to talk to people. He has that conversation with Dick, where Dick's scolding him for not working very hard and stuff. And as he leaves, Tony reveals that he's very worried about being killed, like his family member was. And there's the scene with the teacher. Same thing happens with the teacher, and then she's opened up to, and it feels like, again, this is someone who comes from no real experience with the show. Feels like it's trying to draw a very clear link between all these people trying to talk about their problems and trying to open up to each other, as Tony is sort of, I suppose, doing in the show. I mean, you know a lot better than I do how it goes, but not quite being able to, and ultimately it ends up. With Dick in particular, he's lashing out, and then the remorse and the opening up sort of comes afterwards.
I think these are all questions for you, Ben, and I think we're not taking advantage of you properly, because you are an expert on the show. So it might be a good idea to go through the characters, the situations, or, you said you were sitting next to all of those Soprano fans that were reacting in a particular way. So take us through that. What ways, which characters, what connections do you see?
Yeah, sure. So I think Mike's on the money there. Really, the one reason that the show is considered to be fairly feminist to a degree is because you have Tony in a powerful woman's office, and he's framed like a little kid. This big skulking man is sat down and having to expose his feelings and himself. So there's definitely, I totally agree with what you said. What a lot of fans were laughing about, but I feel a lot of general fans weren't laughing about, was the way Silvio is portrayed, and it just didn't work for me. That's the character with the hair coming off, and he was almost the character's trying too hard. He was gurning, and he had the same walk. And there's towards the end where he walks towards the end of the warehouse door to open it to see the kids still there. Like the collection of fans chuckled, and they were saying, "Oh wow, he's really captured the same walk," but it didn't really add anything. It felt like he was an actor and a character from something completely different, where everyone's overacting into this fairly realistic world, and it just clashed for me. Really, that was what I thought. Oh, that's interesting. That's just something that isn't really working. Is working for the fans, but not for the general fans. I thought.
And some of the other characters.
I really liked Junior Soprano, actually. I thought that... I can't remember the actor's name now. He brought a real sort of energy and fierceness. And
Michael Soprano, I think. Is it?
Sorry.
No, it's not the son. It's the guy who breaks his back, isn't it?
Yeah.
Corey Stoll.
Yeah. He was wonderful, yes.
Corey Stoll.
Yeah, that's right. I was looking for it here. He was really good.
Yeah, he was the bloke in Ant-Man.
Yeah. But yeah, the interplay between Mother and Tony, actually, you could really see the beginnings of that relationship forming, because the series, they do cut back to these scenes when he was a kid now and again. But here, I think it made it a bit more complex, actually, in a way. In the series, she's this terrible mother, and they hate each other, and she tells someone to have Tony killed because he's not respecting her. Whereas here you see a lot of, actually I would say a lot of affection for him in a way, and not really knowing how to express that. There's a lot of that in the series as well. The sort of intergenerational, we don't know how to talk to our kids or discipline them in the right way. You see a mother who cares, and I thought that was really fascinating conversation between her and the teacher, where the teacher's saying, he's really smart and he can go a long way, and she doesn't really know how to acknowledge that. She almost talks him down in a way because they can't really expect to have those aspirations given where they are in society. So I thought that really added, it opened a window quite well when you only get glimpses in the series without, like I say, completely ruining the backstory and making it cliched and ridiculous. And I think you could go back to that film again as a fan. It makes you want to watch the series again. It's almost like an advert for the series in a way.
The young Tony is quite vocal at one or two points about not wanting to join the family's legacy of crime. He wants to go things straight, and there's this whole thing about wanting to be a pro footballer and so on. But then obviously we know that that's not going to be what happens, and I suppose that's crystallised by this thing about accepting the stolen speakers from his uncle. Does that make sense to you? Like that the young Tony would be like that? That's who he was initially, and then he would fall into the family's ways nonetheless.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of what he talks to Dr. Melfi about in the series is the first time he realised his dad was a gangster, and how he passed out when he first saw some blood and a piece of violence and started to negotiate and work out who he was. So I think that would definitely be it's difficult because you spent so long with James Gandolfini and who he is in that moment. It's hard to think, well, would he necessarily be like that as a child? He really, some of the best scenes is when his child, Sir Anthony Soprano Jr. grows up and he just doesn't understand him. And there's this amazing scene in the series where his son's in his pants on MSN Messenger laughing, and it just cuts to him like looking at his son with utter contempt. He just doesn't understand this world where they're all talking to each other through online and laughing, and he thinks his son's too weak. And I can kind of, it's actually quite hard to imagine him as that innocent and young. I would say actually you expect perhaps a bit more of
he's never quite innocent, right? Like, so there is this, on the one hand, I think that the film posits this, let's protect him, let's not turn him into a gangster. But actually you could see that even though he's very appealing and affectionate and so on, that it's almost like he's born that way. Because, given all these different options, he always takes the easy one, right? And then he's really prone to violence. I mean, the scene where he's in the phone booth trying to get his uncle, and where you realize that the girl he's with will become his wife, I mean, that jumping into violence, so I think actually the film does show you that there is something in this kid from the very beginning that makes him ideal for, a couple, right? Like
the running numbers at school as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's one of the key threads throughout the series is this guy. Towards the end, especially Dr. Melfi has her own therapist who she sees, and they're sort of debating, is this guy actually manipulating you? Is this psychiatrist? Is he a psychopath? And she decides to drop him as a client towards the end because she feels actually quite threatened that he might have been playing this game all along. What's interesting, I suppose, I'm just sort of thinking out loud. What's also interesting about the character in the series is that he really cares about animals. Often, somebody who could kill their nephew without thinking about it. Often the cliche trope is, a psychopath, you first realise they're a psychopath when they start as a kid torturing animals. Whereas one of the reasons Tony kills Ralph in the series is because he didn't look after his horse, and he's really angry about it. The first reason he has a panic attack in the first episode is because his ducks fly away and he feels a sense of loss. So I do think it's an interesting a complex character, so that there are elements of him being able to turn on the violence and being hot-headed, and at the same time being quite really valuing certain values really, and close relationships. So the throwing of the speakers is perhaps where he first starts to feel damaged and let down in a way that takes him on this journey. It was an interesting scene.
Picking up from the psychiatrist in the series, that's such a structuring element in the series as a whole. It opens up avenues of discussing the action and the self, that add a layer to the television series. Do you see an equivalent in the film? And if not, what do you think is lost?
I guess I was left wanting more of Tony Soprano. I felt like the director was often capturing capturing his the new actor, his son, from a certain angle, because it's almost like I felt if you're capturing from this low angle, from a bit of a distance, while he's pulling this certain face, he looks a lot like his dad. Let's get a lot of that. I didn't feel like. On the one hand, that works because the whole point about The Sopranos is that he's learning to express himself and talk about his feelings, and it's a dialogue that he's never had. But at the same time, I didn't really see the Tony Soprano here who was as he can express himself a certain way around men, and he's really funny and really has a good sense of timing, and is really intelligent and quick-witted. Around men in the series. Don't necessarily see that, I think, as when he's as a young man. I mean, he's not even the main character in the film, is he? We're seeing the environment he's brought up in. I guess there was an equivalent. The nearest equivalent is him opening up. Only they often say, don't they? His uncle is the only one who can talk to him and the only one he listens to, and then and then that relationship is completely broken. So maybe that's telling us something, but I'm not sure what the nearest equivalent would be. Maybe trying to open up to his mum, and his mum just casting him to one side, perhaps.
I thought one of the interesting things, because one of the things I loved about James Gandolfini is that he had this energy, right? It was just so it wasn't just that he was like intelligent. It was like physically, he had this energy. I think a little bit like Cagney, actually, that they used to say that like Cagney displaced air. Yeah, he was like so electric that like the air. And actually, I think James Gandolfini had a bit about that. And actually, this character has none of it at all. Right? He's very placid. Yeah. So you're shown his intelligence, you're shown his violence, but there's actually a kind of a physical placidity, that is very unlike the soprano that you see in the series that he will grow into.
I thought it was interesting that you said you thought he played a good part, because whenever I think of James Gandolfini, he's like royalty out there. He's compared to the greats. And I think rightly so. James Gandolfini, he's on the same level as Brando, De Niro, Cagney, and that is difficult shoes to fill for his son, who's not really acted in anything. And maybe I just had my expectations too high.
I think you might have, because I thought he was good. I mean, and this is actually more a question maybe of personality than of performance, yeah? So, I think he definitely did not vibrate on screen.
I didn't know it was his son until the credits rolled.
Okay.
And up until then I had been thinking, they've made sure to find someone who looked like James Gandolfini, which is why he's a little bit limited, I did think. And then you reveal that it's actually his son, and so that the choice is kind of obvious. And they've decided that we can go with him. But I do wonder whether there was a better actor out there.
On the other hand, he had the presence that the lead lacked.
Yes, to a point.
Nothing.
To a point.
Maybe,
there was something about him. He did feel like he was quite sinister, but I wasn't sure whether that was everyone working really hard around him to set up this scene, rather than him as an actor making really good choices and having instinct. It can be difficult to tell.
And you're not expecting him to be the complete Tony Soprano from the start. The whole thing is it's how he's going to become that. But I do also think there's too little change. I mean, is there really any change in him from the beginning to the end? I get the feeling that like there's another prequel available to show him developing into the modern day gangster that we saw.
Sure. I mean, he's very young here, and to be fair to him, he only plays the last third of the character, which is a supporting part to begin with, right? Because a younger actor plays the first half of the film or whatever. So I like seeing him. He is in no way a major problem for me. A much bigger problem is the lead. Because I do think that is almost like a charisma-free zone, and that is a problem in the film. You know, I mean, if you think of what Ray Liotta brings in his brief sequences, that's what you want the lead of a film to bring, right? And so it's a real problem when there's a vacuum there.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm thinking about the advertising, the advert I saw at the cinema when for this a few weeks ago was very much centered around, you know, it's Michael Gandolfini, and it was there was a lot of loud music, and I thought I was being sold a series, and then oh no, actually it's just a prequel. So I think it worked. I think whatever was going on, he works as a character. You believe in him, but obviously James Gandolfini will always be a complete powerhouse of an actor who will always be remembered.
But actually, I mean, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I would also say that the guy who played Soprano's father, he was the lead in, I forget which television show, one of them.
Oh, The Walking Dead.
Oh, John Bernthal.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he's so charismatic, right? You can't. He's wonderful and brief. The guy also who falls on his own. He's very charismatic. The wife, I think, also, and certainly the girlfriend, right, who is like a sex bomb. She's wonderful. So, I think it's a real problem.
Corey Stoll's character engineering Dick's death didn't ring true to me. I accepted it because the thing that happens, and maybe it's something that's referenced in the show, and that's why it winds up in the film. I don't know, but it did feel like basically his problem with Dick was that Dick laughed at him when he fell and broke his back. Do these people really have that short a temper? And the thing is, at least when Dick kills people, it's like there's a heat of the moment thing going on, you know. And like I say, with his dad, it was heat of the moment that he was beating him up, but it was an accident that he killed him. It wasn't an accident that he killed the mistress, but it was heat of the moment. Whereas the junior character, it's premeditated. He gets someone to take out a hit. Is there enough reason for that?
Yes.
Even in the world of the gangsters?
Yes. I think so.
It does happen in the first series as well.
I think these gangsters need to bloody grow up.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think that happens in real life. You are removing someone's dignity from them in public. Yeah, and people take those things very seriously. That you have to be respectful.
Maybe it could have been communicated a little bit more richly, cinematically. How.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the film missed a real opportunity. You know, because what I was waiting for the film to show us was that the guy who'd killed him was his nephew.
Yeah.
Because the way that you're shown is you're not shown the face, you don't know who does it, right? So to have revealed that it was the nephew who did it would have added it would have brought so many things together in the film, actually. Yeah, the uncle's disdain, the ignoring him, So, but no, we still don't know.
Do you think it would have made sense for young Tony to have done it?
Yes.
I mean, I already think it doesn't make sense that Junior ordered the hit. I think it would have been wildly, like, for me to buy that Tony was willing to do it just after being ignored by his uncle.
Well, yes.
For 2 days.
I mean, what do you think, Ben? You're the expert. What
I think that definitely would have worked. It was the way he touches the ring with his little finger at the end. That's obviously a nod to the Godfather and the kissing of the ring. I feel it definitely could have worked, and it probably would have told us more about the building of the foundations of this character who goes on to be a really incredible businessman and mafia head, a don. Yeah. We don't quite see a lot of that, actually. We see a lot of, like you say, the charismatic characters around him and the universe he grows up in. And by osmosis, that he inhabits a lot of that, but we don't really see him being as making those actions. And I could have totally believed it. It was sort of hinted that he was maybe quite happy with the uncle being passing on, but where was that shift? Where was that change where he can do what is required? It could have worked. It would have worked.
I do think there's a version of this film which is explicit about Tony being the murderer at the end, the assassin at the end, that would have made sense, but it would have needed to put all sorts of other things in place, I think, before that to show the potential. I'm not sure that would have worked in this version of this film, if you like. I can see it working in a different...
I could see it working.
Yeah.
I do feel there might be a sequel on the way, depending on how it does. It feel like there was a lot of stuff that wasn't told, that we didn't see that happens between that and the film. But what's interesting is Now TV have seen, I think it's 120% increase in the amount of people watching The Sopranos, because there's a pandemic, and it's one of those series whereby people say, "Oh, I never got round to seeing this," and it is landing with the next generation. And also, apparently, it's been Googled 3 times more than usual through the course of the pandemic. So they clearly have seen a business opportunity to make this and possibly another one. I do get quite wary about them ruining the mythology of it and the legacy of it. If they reveal too much, it's very difficult to tread, isn't it? You know, we can't show too much. We don't want to ruin everything. But
there was a thing I read recently. I think it was on a podcast. Someone was talking about James Gandolfini was paid some $5 million not to do a gangster role in a film or something like that, and he was paid by HBO because they wanted to protect him as Tony Soprano. So clearly they understand the power of the character and the value of him, that they would pay James Gandolfini that much to not do something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But unlike other things, Star Wars, Marvel, I don't understand how you could characterize, The Sopranos as a particular universe or a world, in the sense that it's so rooted in East Coast American gangsterism, right? I mean, if you really wanted to do it again, you could move it to a different town, in New York or Jersey or whatever, and come up with another mafia family. So I think these dangers of ruining it or protecting the world. I mean, I can understand why HBO paid Gandolfini at that time, just the same way that Disney had to veto every Haley Mills film, because she has a star persona, and you don't want to ruin, the business on the next film if she plays a teenage prostitute all of a sudden, right? You are protecting the character, and you're protecting, the franchise in a way. Yeah, but the world itself is a very recognizable world from other media, and from other characters. I think what was maybe a little bit different about The Sopranos, and again I turn to you, Ben, I'm not sure, is the tone. And I wonder what your thoughts on about the tone of The Sopranos, and actually whether it has any similarities to the film that we've just seen.
In terms of tone, it was quite a shift. Actually, it felt the pacing is something different, but it was quite quieter, long drawn out. I think the tone. So The Sopranos is one of the funniest things that was on TV. That's why it was such a hit. This film did make me laugh out loud, and it did have humour. But in terms of tone, it maybe wasn't as impactful or as dynamic or as loud, or I don't know. It felt like it was over the course of the whole Sopranos. It is quite a. What was interesting about The Sopranos is that someone can watch an episode in isolation and be completely drawn in by the characters and the story arc of that particular episode and the quandary that Tony's having to face, which is to a degree wrapped up. But you also get so much pleasure in seeing all the episodes, whereas I don't think it had the same. I don't think it was, in terms of tone, I don't think it was necessarily as cutting. This is very much a period piece in the 70s. There's some real bad dudes, but it felt quite removed from one of the best episodes is one of the most impactful episodes is in the first series, where Tony, he takes his daughter on a college trip and ends up strangling this guy to death because he happens to see him across the canteen, and he has to do it in secret and then hide it from his family. I think the tone, it wasn't as necessarily cutting, sarcastic, witty.
I know what you mean. It's funny what you say about getting drawn into just the complete arc of one episode, because I can honestly say that the reason I've never stuck with the show past the first episode is because the first episode, I watched it about 3 times. It feels so complete that I watch it going, I'll watch The Sopranos now, and then I watch the first episode and I go, oh, that's the whole story. It just feels like I get this character and everything about him from episode 1, and I don't feel the need to see episode 2. It's really, and I know that I have to eventually see it.
That's a huge. A lot of people go through that. Actually, I did myself. Yeah. I saw the episode a couple of times before because you see the amount of episodes involved, but also it neatly wraps up at the end.
Yeah.
I think people have either really invested in it and seen loads of episodes, or they've tried it and not, persevered through, because it's you get it straight away.
But I totally get what you mean about the tone here lacking something. I think it's partially the slowness, but I think it comes down actually to what you were saying, Jose, about James Gandolfini. His presence in the show, at least in the episode I was saying, and the few clips around, he has that energy and he has that edge, and you feel like things are a little bit dangerous or something. Whereas here, I mean, despite the fact that so many people die, and they die very surprisingly and shockingly, and you don't necessarily see it coming, someone just walks up and shoots someone in the back of the head. It doesn't feel like it's a dangerous or surprising world that we live in, or one that you have to be on your toes, that kind of thing. And that's, from my brief impression of the show, that's something that the show does communicate. It feels a little blank here, that tone.
Yeah, definitely. You can look at someone in the wrong way, or say something in the slightly wrong tone, and it can be a life or death decision, and you have people constantly watching themselves and trying to work out what they can say in front of other people. Yeah, whereas here, it doesn't have that impact, or that bite in the same way. I thought the scene where the guy that gets shot in the Vietnam recruitment office, it doesn't lack. It was quite gratuitous and quick and loud and shocking, but not to the same degree where you're like, wow, what did I just see? You sort of accept it's part of the world, and it moves on to the next scene.
It's the way it was filmed, because I thought the concept was brilliant, actually. It's just, the way that it was filmed, I think it didn't draw out the full impact of what the situation required. But this is maybe beating a dead horse. So,
I think that is what I didn't get on with Corey Stoll ordering the assassination of Dick. I think that's what I didn't get on with, because I've just said that this is a world where people can die at a moment's notice, and we see that throughout the film. So you're right to say, of course it makes sense it would happen, but I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like it had been communicated, it had been set up tonally that this was a present or ever-present danger. So I think if it had been, then when you see those shots from basically the POV of Corey Stoll on his back, looking up at Alessandro Nivola laughing at him, had it been set up, I would have felt, oh, this man's going to die.
I mean, I think the film does set it up in dialogue, but it doesn't do so kind of visually or rhythmically. Because there's the look that he gives when the guy laughs. Then there's the conversation with the wife, and and then he can't fuck, which and he blames him for it. I mean, you do get accumulation of elements, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So but it's just the way that it's shown.
Would you recommend it to someone who's not seen the series? I don't know that I would. Oh, you would?
I would, yes, I would. I mean, I found it entertaining, and I love that. I found it funny. I love that young actress who plays the Italian bride.
Let me find her.
Yeah, we must find her name.
We've not mentioned her.
And I love Ray Liotta. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic dual performance. So to me, all of those things is a good enough reason to see the film. I mean, it's sometimes very easy to say, oh, well, it's not this and it's not that and it's not a masterpiece and whatever. But, I think I really enjoyed watching it. So.
Good, because I'm just so entrenched in the series and the fandom. I thought, I'm getting something out of this. But if you don't know any of the characters, is it creating enough for you? I suppose that's the question for Mike.
For really. Mike, yeah.
Well, before I answer it, I can tell you that Giuseppina, the Italian wife, is played by Michela De Rossi.
Fantastic, Michela, you're a star.
She's got amazing hair. I would say, as someone who doesn't know the show, this is not something that makes me want to watch the show. The reasons that I want to watch the show are pre-existing, and they haven't changed. But this doesn't enhance any of them really.
That's interesting.
It's not particularly rewarding for me. I laughed. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the film. I was with the film, despite the fact I felt it maybe lagged a little, and I wanted to know where it was going and so on. I was with every scene individually, and I liked a lot of the dialogue. I was with most of the performances. It got a lot of laughs. Corey Stoll when John Bernthal gets out of prison and he sees the black family's moved into the street, and John and he basically looks at Corey Stoll, and Corey Stoll goes, "You're looking at me for?" I got the biggest laugh out of me. I thought it was a brilliantly the timing on the delivery of that line was perfect. Really, really funny film. But it feels to me like a separate concern almost to The Sopranos, because I don't know The Sopranos, and it is not something that on its own makes me interested to see The Sopranos.
But would you recommend it as a film?
I mean, it's all right.
Well, I thought it was much better than all right, really. I would recommend it. So, all right. Well, on that note,
Great.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you, Ben. Thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Our social media is Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thanks again, Ben.
Bye, Ben.
Bye. Thank you.